See, it's dangerous because you're starting up a new thing for her, and
Part of our routine. I know.
once she gets into a routine,
I know. It's like at
then you're
night. As soon as
stuck.
I come into the room, are you gonna sit down? Are we gonna sit now? It's time for us to sit. Sit.
See, she's given up on me because I don't sit down anymore. In part because she used to put me to sleep every time I sat down. She just crawl up in my chest and go to sleep, and
Hey,
then
so pick me up
purr
now.
and yeah. So she's decided it's
No. I sit down. Hey.
yeah,
Hi.
and then she reaches up with her paws.
Hi. Hey, me. I'm right here.
All right. So where we left off was the end of the book.
I was gonna pin.
So I'll read the last chapter of the last book. We want to go through the epilogue of book 3.
That's not how this works.
Okay. All right. So chapter 3 of book 2.
It's harder, you know that.
Huh?
Right?
She's not really concerned about
She
any
never
pinning
is.
you have to do.
She never is.
That's not really her problem.
What are you doing?
Don't pin her by accident as she rubs up against
She
you.
is so used to this.
Can you be? Don't get pinned. Don't get pinned.
She's
Please.
so used to me pinning stuff.
I don't want any video footage of you getting hurt. That would be upsetting. Okay, chapter 3.
It'd be upsetting that there was video footage, or
That she got hurt. And then it's
Okay, just
immortalized
wanted
on
to
the
clarify,
internet so that I
kids.
can remain horrified by it. Forever. She's making me nervous because she keeps going underneath you there.
do you not
All right.
see her at night?
Yeah, it's different at night though because you're laying down and there's more room. Right now there isn't as much room.
She does the same thing though.
All right. The shuttle comes in for a landing none too soon for Rob and Steve. Their mother has been talking the entire trip, which was taken far too at a far too leisurely pace than necessary. It certainly flies in the face of the apparent urgent nature of this visit. The shuttle slowly descends onto the roof of the Special Operations Headquarters. There, the Webster twins see Dave Bellows awaiting their arrival, his hands behind his back and his famous scowl on his face. John had told them about that scowl and how it haunted his nightmares. Now it might haunt theirs as well. It was time to now head into an unknown future tied to this entity which employed both John and Jim. Maybe it's a destiny for all members of their family to be here in some capacity, though Rob and Steve's place is still unknown at this point. Rob and Steve manage to make their way off the shuttle before their mother has a chance to do so. She's still talking to one of the security officers who brought them here about how dignity is the thing of the past, lamenting the same fate has befallen Honor. He has been pleasant enough towards her, but the twins know he isn't actually listening to her. They have experience with that and know the vacant look one can get when mother starts ranting. Boys, you made it, Dave says with a fake smile. I didn't want to bring you here like this, but things happen which have made this necessary. What are you talking about? Steve asks. You boys will have a chance to find out what I mean soon enough. It's difficult for me to explain, so if you will, follow me and I can enlighten you as we walk, Dave says, motioning towards the exit from the roof. It isn't a request as much as he makes us want to seem pleasant and casual. It isn't a request as much as he makes us want to seem. All right. I could word that better. I know. It is an order, much like being brought here wasn't optional either. As he motions them away from the shuttle, the door to the roof opens and a man in a lab coat quickly makes his way onto the roof, holding his hands up towards Dave and the others. Hold it right there, Dave, he says in a somewhat agitated tone. We have to talk about this. Dave stops. Blair, what the hell are you doing up here? This is a military matter. Aren't there monkeys you should be experimenting on? Blair looks at Rob and Steve, shaking his head. This is a science matter. I made certain they will be handed over to me. There is nothing you will learn from them since they don't know what you want them to know. You'll have to wait your turn and maybe you can interview them when I'm done with what I need to do. Thank you for bringing them, Dave, but I'll take over from here, Blair says, patting Dave on the shoulder. Dave points at Blair, his eyes narrowed and his brow furrowed. He's not impressed, but he knows he isn't going to win this argument. This is not over. I found this information out and I called them here. You overstepped your bounds. I'll have words with Alice and Hannon about this. Your head just keeps getting bigger and I don't like you much. Blair nods. She's the one who gave me jurisdiction over this matter. Good luck swaying her back in your direction, Dave. Blair leads the Webster twins away from Dave with their mother tagging along behind them. Marianne isn't saying a word now and now that they're off the shuttle. This is a large change for her, but she senses there's much more here for her to learn. She needs to take everything in and make decisions based on what she learns here. She knows this is a watershed moment for her boys. She has always been aware that they were special and that the government would likely want to hide them from the world if they found out how special they truly were. She'd been ready for this moment since before they were born. God had revealed how special the boys were before birth, but labor itself had been quite the experience. She had experienced very little pain, the duration of labor being less than an hour for each boy and less than 90 minutes for the twins. She'd given birth to all four at home, with a midwife delivering them. She didn't want to have them at a hospital for risk of someone stealing her precious children. The boys were under her care, and this world would try to take them from her, and eventually the world would want to kill them. This is one of the theories which had dominated her mind every day that she's lived. Rob and Steve weren't worrying about their mother at this point in time. Neither of them liked where this was heading. As upsetting as it was to be called for military debriefing, being poked at by guys in lab coats seemed worse. Neither of them were saying anything, but they didn't have to. They knew each other well enough to bypass the speaking part of conversations. There's unspoken communication in the form of known body language at play between them, slumped shoulders and barely discernible eye rolling when they looked at one another. They were aware they had to stay quiet regarding their apprehension right now, though. As the boys are led down into the building from the roof, then to an elevator which quickly descends, still nothing is spoken between them or between their new captor and themselves. Steve and Rob look at one another while the man in the lab coat watches the floor numbers drop. He finally turns and smiles at the boys. "Steve and Rob Webster, my name is Blair Drake. I am the head of a Special Operations Science Division. I've been doing a lot of research and waited for a tremendous opportunity like this." "What do you mean?" Rob asks. Blair looks surprised by the question and looks over at Marianne Webster. "You knew, right? As their mother, you knew about this, right?" "About what?" Marianne asks. She isn't being completely truthful here, but she doesn't want to give up anything to the guy in the lab coat that she feels he doesn't need to know. She does have the sinking feeling that old secrets are about to be revealed to her sons. "We have tests on John and suspect these boys will match these tests that were performed on him. If they do, this is a very special situation we find ourselves in. This planet is at war now, and we need all the advantages we can find, both in terms of weaponry and the sciences needed," Blair says with a smile as he pats Rob and Steve on the shoulder. Rob shudders. "We're an advantage in a war? I don't like the sound of that. I really hate people talking about me as if I'm not here." Steve nods. "You gonna fill us in, Doc?" "Soon enough," Blair says, and then turns away while Marianne stares at the floor. Next scene. It had been a huge move on his part. It was a move made 30 years ago by Earth's clock, but for him it had actually been a much longer time. There were 3 tribes of humans, and as far as he knew, he was the last of his kind. It was a weight on his mind, one which sometimes felt heavier than he could stand sober. Addison Marx is over 100 years of age, but he still looks like he's 30. He should be in an old folks' home, but he's renting a condo in New York. He should be celebrating a 50th anniversary with a wonderful woman who had been everything to him for so long. But he's waking up next to a one-night stand again. This sometimes saddens him, but he is a man hiding from the truth. Sex and alcohol help distract him from the more important things plaguing his mind. It's all about cheating death. Addison's been fortunate, and now he feels like he's invincible, which sometimes makes him more reckless and arrogant than most. He keeps his secrets to himself and moves around every 10 years or so before people take notice of the fact he isn't aging as people should. This is life as he lives it, a man who's been given a second chance to live. He had a long life among his people, but they're gone now. His people were pure human form, less the lack of aging. Here on Earth, humans evolved from other creatures. Their DNA was tied to the creatures around them, and as romantic as that seemed, it left them vulnerable to scientific meddling on a catastrophic level. On this planet, their genetic structure, their very DNA, was the pure human form only. Or was of the pure human form only. Evolution was a tricky beast. The same seeding process which provided the blocks of life on Earth had done so on Falteris. It had also done so on Conley, Addison's home world. The material which aided the beginning of life on Conley, however, didn't retain information from previous life forms. When it evolved, and the evolution process happened a lot faster. Conley had been a lush planet filled with varying forms of life, and the human population that had lived there had done so in harmony with the rest of the ecosystem. Addison had been a scientist who studied astronomy, and he was the one who made important discoveries regarding life elsewhere in the galaxy. He and a group of fellow scientists had struggled with the ultimate question of where life had truly begun, one which likely would never be answered, and certainly that answer wouldn't satisfy everyone even if it was discovered. He knew just how many people would fight against scientific facts in order to cling to their belief system, no matter how outdated it might seem. Science here on Earth was behind that he had done on Conley. He could have helped them advance beyond their primitive beliefs, but he wanted to stay off the map. He had one waking nightmare that had dogged him his entire 30 years on Earth. It haunted his memories that he had been the one to send a hail to Altel of all worlds once a deep space probe had determined that intelligent life lived there. There was no way for Addison to know the horror that would follow, but Altel had arrived determined to kill everything on the planet after assuring his people that they had come in peace. A lie which he knew he should have seen through. There was no explanation offered when they had attacked, and Addison helplessly watched people being burned in the streets before entire cities were reduced to ashes. The escape had been cowardly. He had intended to take a space flight to Earth when a probe had found life forms there that were human, but not in the midst of an escape from a war zone. He'd wanted to be a pioneer, not a man who ran from genocide. He had taken flight into space on what appeared to the rest of the world as a simple missile, but it was actually hollowed out and had an area for him to live in stasis until he reached his destination, the planet Earth, where he now lived as a normal Earthling. The Altilians had ignored it when it launched, as they assumed it had been a misfired missile, which missed his target and was heading into deep space. He hid who he was when he arrived on Earth and where he was from out of fear that his new home would regard him with fear, and he'd be hidden in a medical center for the rest of his extremely long natural life. It never occurred to Addison his lifestyle here had consequences. He didn't stop partying and moving on long enough to consider such a thing. Up until this day, he had never wondered what his life might have been like until this day when he saw a face on a TV screen which caused his heart to skip a beat. His heart never really did that. He turns the TV up, risking waking up his date, and he couldn't even remember her name. Arcology 1237 is in chaos, as some people have been allowed to leave while others are being kept for further screening after a man blew himself up. This man, John Webster, is taxed with the heavy burden of cleaning this mess up and being on the front lines in our war with Altel. This world has gone from not knowing whether there's life out there to be at war within a day's time, the young redhead reporter says from her studio. Her worried appearance seems strained and fake. It's likely they're raking in the money with the ratings this global crisis is drawing. They then show an image from one of the other camera crews that had filmed the firefight aboard Arcology 1237, which clearly shows an Altilian firing its gun at human civilians in the room. The images and videos had been shown hundreds of times since being filmed. Addison slowly sits down in his beanbag chair while he wonders how long he has been drunk to have missed such huge news. He had hoped to never see those ugly creatures again. He would have sat on a couch or recliner if they weren't covered in garbage from the previous night's partying. He's lucky he didn't collapse on the floor in shock. Can't be, is all he manages to say. He thinks back. It would have been at least 30 years ago, shortly after he arrived on Earth. The name Webster seems familiar, but it is a rather common name. He wasn't one for writing names and places down either. This partying lifestyle wasn't one that helped his memory. This one-night stand with blonde hair. The one-night stand with blonde hair stumbles out of the bedroom dressed only in one of his t-shirts. She's not even wrapped in a blanket so he can pretend she has any shame. She's attractive, but they're all attractive. It's as common as the name Webster. What are you doing up, Addie? Addison. Call me Addison, he says sternly. You didn't care about that last night, she says, sitting in his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. She still smells of vodka and beer. It's not a sweet smell. Not a good combo. That was last night. You know the way out, he says, gently pushing her away as he stands up. He gets off the beanbag chair and starts cleaning up his place. I have a busy day ahead of me, so I'll call you, okay? She frowns, trying the pouty girl look he knows so well. These one-night stands try to make it out to be more than they need to. They cling to him and sometimes try to guilt him into becoming their significant other. It's a real turnoff for him. I thought we could hang out here and maybe go for another round to connect the dots. You and I are the dots. Addison sighs. That's not going to happen. Look, I'm not kidding here. Something's come up. He says as he looks at the image of John Webster on his TV screen. Yeah, this is kind of big. The young blonde's green eyes light up as she looks on the TV. That's John Webster. He's this totally hot hero guy. Saved Earth or something. He's been on the news for a couple of days now. She looks at Addison and looks back at John. Wow, you could totally pass for his brother. That's an insane resemblance. Are you two related? Addison pauses. I don't even know your name, she admits. She smiles. I'm Cherry Banks. Yeah, I'm sure you are. So, where are we going today then? Addison picks up his keys from the couch and turns to her. I'm going to the store to get myself coffee. I have running around to do. When I go back, I expect you not to be here. Do you have that? Before she has a chance to pull whatever crying fit she'll undoubtedly try, he exits his condo. If she's there when he gets back, he'll really lay down the law. He doesn't know why girls don't get how this goes. When he was a young man on Conley, he'd believed in love and committing to one person for life. But that had been before the love of his life had burned before his eyes. He should have been able to save her, but he failed. Alcohol barely dulled that pain. The previous experiences he had with Altil had caused him to flee, to try and live while everyone else perished. Once his love was dead, he had no reason to stay and fight. He had come to Earth since they saw no contact with Altil, and it seemed like a safe place to hide out and move from town to town as he saw fit. He would live out his years living life, loving it and celebrating it, running from life as he had known it before. He was still going through his past in his mind as he bought his coffee. He could see faces, but he couldn't grasp names from his first few years on Earth. He'd been less promiscuous back then, but there was still a long list of women who shared his bed. He'd been very free when it came to love and all that, just not as consistently drunk and sleazy about it. It was all about getting away from memories of his wife and life before he lived here. This planet bothered him on many levels. The fact they kept reproducing at alarming rates among certain parts of the population, despite having nowhere to put more people, seemed to indicate this species was self-destructive and never thought things out. The entire arcology idea had been flawed from the start, and Addison had wanted to weigh in on security issues these ships were going to have. He stayed silent since he was merely a normal man here, not an alien who had advanced knowledge that could help these people avoid a sad, dark fate. Again, Addison was feeling guilty. The news that people were being slaughtered by the very creatures he had escaped years ago was poetic justice in the darker regions of his mind. He was meant to die at their hand. Part of him was determined to fly himself to Altil, surrender, and offer his life in exchange for that of the people around him here who just didn't know any better. The sky overhead was bright. Addison looked up at the skyscrapers around him. New York was still filled with tall buildings that spent centuries defying gravity. As the Earth became more and more of a melting pot culturally, more and more large business centers popped up. Each one tried to be taller and more impressive than the last, and it showed just how wealthy the top 2% of the income earners on this planet had become at the expense of the other 98%. There had been attempts to fix economic imbalance over the centuries, but those results had had mixed results at best. This was the place to be if you wanted to blend in, to not be seen as special, and if you wanted to be nameless. He'd spent 5 years in New York so far, and he still didn't know the name of his neighbors. No one even bothered to look at him most days, and this was the way he wanted it. If people knew who he was and what he was, they might judge him and tell him horrible truths that he'd spent his life ignoring. He's on his way back to his condo when a young man, likely in his early 20s, looks him in the eye. "You look familiar." "Yeah, I have a face like that," Addison says and tries to move on, but the man stands in his way. "You look like that John Webster guy on the news." "Yeah, I get a lot of that since the arcology thing. No relation to me," Addison says nervously. So much for being just a face in a crowd and a nameless one at that. Now he'd be the guy who looked like John Webster, and this was unacceptable to him. "Yeah, you look so much like him. Are you sure you're not related?" the man persists. "I am totally certain, yes. John Webster, that hero? Yeah, no, I'm just a guy who runs a strip club in Eastern New York City," Addison says, and he pulls a business card from his pocket to hand to the man. This revelation causes the man to take a step back as he looks at the name on the card. "No, that's okay. I hear what goes on in that club. I guess you're not related. Just an amazing coincidence that a sleaze merchant can look like a hero to this world." The man moves on and Addison looks over his business card. He doesn't own the strip club. He just spent money on fixing the place up and was made a full partner by the real owner, a man Addison knows simply as Jake. He doesn't even know the man's last name because it doesn't matter. There were no ties allowed in this life of his. Though Addison knows there is a negative stigma attached to most strip clubs, the one he's part owner of is supposed to be higher class than others. Since prostitution was legalized in New York City, it's been one depraved city. The government encouraged prostitution due to tax money that they earned from it. Addison had felt this club was above that side of the industry, simply an establishment where girls danced and took their clothes off for money. There was no fooling around involved, nothing crazy or insane going on behind the doors of his club. Maybe Jake could ramp things up now that it looked like the world might be ready to punch its ticket thanks to overpopulation and reckless disregard for the world they lived in. It'd be a natural assumption that the populace would be ready to do pretty near anything in desperate times to escape the dark reality in their future. As Addison walks up the driveway leading to his building, he looks around him and wonders if this is all soon going to be on fire. The Altilians would take great joy in bringing these huge buildings down to the ground and killing so many so fast. This place was primed for an attack by those evil creatures, and despite the fact he could not have prevented them from coming here, Addison still feels responsible for causing this. He enters his condo and finds Cherry hasn't left. In fact, she's still wearing his black t-shirt and eating his cereal in his recliner that she's cleaned off. She's also cleaned up the living room. She smiles at him. "You're back," she says cheerfully. "Cherry," he begins. She intercepts him. "That's my stripper name. I've been going by Cherry for years. I saw you at Unexhibited Extreme and found out that who you were from there. You dance at the club? I'm almost never in there. Must have needed to ask Jake something or whatever, he says as his day keeps getting worse. This is becoming complicated. He really doesn't like complicated. Yeah, but my real name's Chelsea Bellows, he continues. You know I did tell you to leave before, right? She ignores the question and continues her rambling. Now, when I asked you who you were, I found out something really interesting. You move around a lot, Addison. Addison's heart skips a beat again. He wants that to stop happening today. So you're stalking me. Now I really need you to leave. The thing is, I can't find any record of you having parents. This is like the 31st century, Addison. Everyone has parents if you look back at the records. You don't. I went over it a few times. I found nothing. I even used a security clearance to search records other people have, and I can't find anything about your parents. Nothing. You kept a low profile and managed to not be noticed, but that's changing now, she says and stands and makes her way over to Addison, grinning ear to ear. She strokes his hair. I can't figure out how a man your age has no gray hair, incredible stamina, and passes for being much younger. Addison backs away from her. There are times in your life where you need to leave things alone. I appreciate you're interested enough to stalk me, but I don't talk about my personal life with anyone. I did have parents, but they passed away a long time ago. The records were cleared by my request, he says, really wanting her to leave now. She shakes her head and laughs. Why are you lying? The records I looked at would tell me if you did. I wouldn't be here if I found any evidence you did that. You've moved around to keep yourself from being found out, and I found out about you. Now, unless you want to off me and bury me somewhere, I think we're going to have to talk about this before I go to my father with this information. Who's your father? Dave Bellows, Commander of Special Operations in Los Angeles. Dad has something going on right now, and your reaction to John Webster's image on the television tells me you're hiding things that you may not even be aware you're hiding. Now, I can tell my father you took advantage of me and that you're an alien or whatever. I can do that, or we can talk. It's your call, she says with a shrug. Addison looks out the window and considers jumping. This actually would have been much easier if she just would have if she was just in love with him or pregnant. There would be no more hiding for Addison Marx. So she started out as kind of dippy, but then you find out she's not. Mm-hmm. She knows exactly who, and she was giving him a chance to admit it. And he didn't want to, and she's like, yeah, no. So, interesting and true story. Addison, the character that I created, I had a friend at my former job that she miscarried, and she found out there was going to be a boy, and they were going to call it Addison. So I named the character in this book after that, and I thought it was a gesture, actually through her, because we weren't really like close friends or anything. So, yeah. And then he became like a major character in the book. And he's, I'm pretty sure, still a major character in the third part too. You know. And so there you go. It's like, oh, he's got a ditzy character. No, not really. No. If they lay it on that thick, odds are it's not it's going to be an act. So, all right. I based that on you, sweetie. So, yeah, you start off as kind of ditzy, and then
Pardon?
you find out, out there's some real smarts going on in the noggin.
Just shut it.
So, you know. And, yeah. And, all right. So you guys are caught up for tonight on Into the Void, The Believer, which is book 2. And, we'll do this again probably in about a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3. So, we don't want to overdo it. So, you understand, right?
It's not how this works.
This whole not overdoing it thing.
You don't do not overdoing. That's not how you work.
You're saying that because of my giant 4-foot by 3-foot board here where I'm trying to figure out playoff numbers from 1981 through to 2019. I've got 1981 done.
You know we have a straight edge, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Just
it really doesn't matter.
Throwing that out there.
It really doesn't matter. Because honestly, it would work best if I use the tape, but I don't want to use that much tape.
Oh, no. Yeah, that'd be a pain.
Especially when it's not a permanent thing. So, yeah, I didn't want to do that. All right. So, that means it's treadmill time and all that other wonderful stuff for me.
So I get to see you before 11 o'clock at night?
In theory, unless I decide to do an hour and a half of running.
Doesn't happen.
Unless I do an hour and a half of running or...
We're going to sit here now.
Start watching a bunch of NSP videos.
No, that's not.
But they're so good. Every night now, before we go to sleep, I have to watch like 4 or 5 different videos of theirs. And there's so many videos from them that they're just... And I'm like, all right, one more. Oh, look, there's another one. Okay, one more. Okay, no, one more. One more. And Ninja Brian now is kind of what I think I'm going to be for Halloween. I think Ninja Brian would be fantastic. I just need to find that shirt with the angel wings. And then I'm all set. I can be Ninja Brian for Halloween. So, NSP, they're fantastic. If We Were Gay is the funniest song ever. It is easily the funniest song I've ever heard. It is just you don't see the ending coming. It starts out as this kind of funny song, and then it builds up to this absolutely tremendous finish. It's genius. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching once again. I enjoy doing this and going through and realizing I need to redo all these books. But when that happens, I will do like live updates on what I'm doing, what I'm writing, and all that stuff. So that would be kind of fun if I get back into the writing side of things, and I could share with you guys as I'm writing. All right. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through and for some reason this was your first video. And I will be doing this again on a nightly basis. And thanks again. I'll talk to you again soon.